There's a lot of things we do in the past that we look at now and cringe, like when you were a kid and you asked that girl out in elementary school only for her to reject you, or waking up late for an important interview, or telling Doctor Strange to wipe out everyone's memory because you just exposed yourself as Spider-Man. Just a lot of stuff can happen. Hi, my name is Jessa. Let's look at our top 10 normal things from the past that didn't age well. Number 10, smoking indoors. Yes, there was a time when people used to smoke indoors, from cafes to restaurants to workplaces, even in the car with their kids. But after decades of this, it was apparent after many cases of smoker's lung turned to lung cancer and various other health defects did this turn over. Even to those who are also exposed to what we now know as secondhand smoke, the first Surgeon General's report on the adverse health effects of smoking was published in 1964. Within a year of that report, the first law requiring the labeling of cigarette packaging with health warnings was then passed. Restrictions on smoking in public places, government buildings, and airplanes were implemented in the 1970s, most of which limited but not banned smoking. In 1973, Arizona then became the first state to have some smoke-free public places, and the Civil Aeronautics Board requested no smoking sections in all commercial airline flights. In 1997, President Bill Clinton issued an executive order banning smoking in federal buildings, protecting nearly 2 million workers and their patrons from exposure to secondhand smoke. Eventually, other countries around the world, between the release of the effects of smoking till now, have all constituted bans on smoking indoors. Number 9, wooden cars. Yes, during the construction of vehicles that go from a variety of sizes and looks, the most common one since the 1930s till its discontinuation due to safety and aesthetics, and just nobody was really into them anymore, was the late 1990s of the wooden cars. The appearance of polished wood gave the resemblance to fine wooden furnitures, and on many occasions the wood theme continued to the dashboard and inner door panels, including the rear tailgate. I mean, wooden cars are still around, but it isn't as practical or looked at with, ooh, that's a really nice car. Just more on the fact of how outdated and possibly how much of a safety hazard it was. Despite constant care and attention as you would have to, it is also made out of wood, and the wood was prone to moisture damage, discoloration, and rot. Either way, it looks good, but practically not so much. Number 8, medic. When you get sick nowadays, your first thought is either let your immune system handle it, drink water, eat some citrus, take medicine, or if it's really bad, go to the doctor if you can afford to. But back in the day, bloodletting was E for everyone. Your doctor might prescribe bloodletting, aka leeches, as bloodletting was actually recommended as a treatment for infections and other ailments all the way through the 1940s, which seems pretty unreal today. Penicillin would only be discovered in 1928 by Dr. Alexander Fleming. It would also take 2 more decades for a patient to be successfully treated by it. Number 7, old maid. The woman's job of the 1950s was to strive to be and look like the perfect housewife, a girl who was termed old maid if not married by the age of 25, like me. And if not married by then, she would be considered something wrong with her, like me. Showing too much of one intellectual smarts was not always an attractive quality. However, if her tone was cute enough, she would be acceptingly to say anything, almost. Typically, most respected professions for women were teachers, secretaries, and nurses, but still, it was expected for the woman to put her family first. Often, women would have to quit her job in the time of family callings or pregnancy. Nowadays, women can still be homemakers and stay-at-home moms as well, but men can also be stay-at-home dads too. In fact, in today's society, specifically in more westernized ones, women would be equal, if not more, of part of the workforce. Equal shares in the household is split between partners in regards to household care and spending. Either way, over time, with the help of feminist and suffrage movements in the 1800s that spread throughout decades and decades of conversations and support, most women around the world are capable of identifying their rights, but of course, there's still a lot of more work to do in regards to the rights of bodily autonomy, fair wages, and that goddamn pink tax. Number 6, political marriages. Although it does still occur now in regards to arranged marriages, in some cultures they still continue and practice today. But to be honest, arranged marriages were everywhere in every part of the world, and it has been consensual between both parties. Typically, you meet your potential partner with the supervision of your family to see if you both share the same family values and ethics. And if you don't want to be with that person, then you just gotta say, nah, not for me. In the 1300s and as well as around the world, including Europe, men sometimes were able to choose their brides. Marriage back in the day was not based on love, as most marriages were political arrangements. Husbands and wives were generally strangers until they first met, and if love was involved at all, and hopefully it came after the couple had been married. But as a consensus as a whole, the ideology of political or couples being set up for marriage by their parents in the average household is not as common anymore. Now you gotta deal with dating apps, men hitting on you in the gym, and random DMs on your Instagram. But to be honest, being single in today's world is also pretty normal too, and even encouraged for those who don't want to get married. At least the stigma of being an old maid or a lonely old man isn't as seen as you weren't picked, just more of like, I just didn't want to. Number 5, interracial marriages. Speaking of marriages, if you wanted to marry someone who happened to be part of a different ethnicity than you would have probably died. It wasn't until the case of Mildred and Richard Loving where this interracial couple helped change the notion and stigma of interracial marriages. The Lovings were criminally charged with interracial marriage under a Virginia statute banning such marriages and were forced to leave the state to avoid being jailed. They moved to Washington, D.C., but wanted to return to their hometown. With the help of the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, they filed a suit to overturn the law. In 1967, the Supreme Court ruled in their favor, striking down the Virginia statute and all state anti-miscegenation, as their laws are unconstitutional, for violating due to process and equal protection of the law under the 14th Amendment. When the LGBT rights were in the spotlight for marriage in 2007, Mildred came into the spotlight after a very long time of being in hiding and spoke up for love in all forms. In quote, she says, "I am still not a political person, but I am proud that Richard's and my name is on court cases that can help reinforce the love and the commitment, that fairness, and that family that so many people, black or white, young or old, gay or straight, seek in life. I support the freedom to marry for all. That's what loving and loving are all about." As for today, 94% of Americans actually approve interracial marriages, compared to 1958, which was just 4%. As Mrs. Loving said, she was right, love wins. Number 4, labor laws. Over time, it had become extremely apparent that the average everyday working person are truly the backbones of society. They are the reasons why everything or anything is functional, from food industries, tech, medical education, natural resources, farming, and agriculture. These people who work hard every day to ensure the consistencies of society are the reasons why so many laws are passed now to ensure their rights are taken care of. However, big corporations still like to take advantage and find loopholes or just straight ignore their workers for their own gains. And when it comes to labor laws, the concept of it was never apparent in its current form today. From minors, young people, pregnant mothers, people with disabilities, or elderly, everyone was either forced to work or had no choice but to. As the economies fluctuate in coal, steel plants, factories, and glass, everyone from every age would be in unsafe conditions. But with that being said, strikes like the Great Southwest Railroad strikes of 1886, the steel strike of 1959, and even the writers and actors strikes that ended in 2023 helped change the laws like a C-58 bill that was passed in Canada that prevents employers replacing their workers who are on strike. Number 3, social aesthetics. As time changes, so did society's perspective on beauty. So if you came back from the war, however, if you also looked disheveled and also had lost some limbs, you would be outcasted from society despite your heroics on the field. So the sense of those who are disabled, or even genetic mutations or genetic deformities that prevent cells from forming from birth, or even people who suffer from amputations due to illnesses or accidents, may have been also looked at with disdain and ignorance in the past. Today, although the stigma still exists in parts of the world, but the recognition of empathy has been widely transparent, where now those who have these disabilities have accessibilities, as for those who are unable to travel without support. But still, it is noted that the world does still need to allow spaces for those who need more assistance in getting around, and to not be discriminated no matter how they are perceived. Considering back in the day, though, they also had an ugly law in Chicago for those who did suffer from those lost appendages from war or battle, but it was finally dropped in 1974. Number 2, bloody fights. You bet back in the day they had no problems picking a fight on the street without any repercussions, from Roman times to Middle Ages, and I mean even now you can fight someone on the street but you'd be looked at as like a complete idiot for having anger issues. But even then it was normal everywhere, even to some cultures or places in society. If you didn't have to have a fight now and then, you'd be considered a wuss or a square. In the Middle Ages, fighting and violence despite brutality was always looked at as a sense of honor. Now when you fight, you get in trouble with the law, which is at the very least reduces in other means, but if it is for a sense of self-defense, that's a different story. But aside human fights, if humans couldn't fight, illegal means of forcing animals in the ring together was also widely popular. As of now, it also violates a lot of animal rights. And finally, number 1, public executions. Finally, at number 1, as it doesn't get more and more concerning, then this was public executions. Yes, everyone would gather around in the Times Square just to watch someone die. And it was extremely normal despite how morbid it was. The justice systems of the day reflected the society it served. Traitors were shot, violators were hanged, and justice was merciless. Throughout its history, around 15,000 people have been executed in the United States, possibly more, as sometimes people would just take it upon themselves to hang people without documentation. Like most countries and cultures, capital punishment was often public spectacles in the USA. In fact, the last public execution in the country was attended by as many as 20,000 people. Public vigilantism was frequently resorted to for all manner of crime, for cattle thieves and killers in the West, and for just basically being black in the South. Of the 4,743 people lynched in the country between 1882 and 1968, 72% were black. And in other places like in France, execution by guillotine was also another huge popular spectacle, as it thrived the public of being able to take justice into their own hands. But the bloody phenomenon ended in 1977 with a criminal who died by beheading. Well, that's all for today on this insane, interesting list. My name is Jessa. Be sure to like and subscribe. And again, and maybe something normal now could also be really weird in the future. Anyways, bye.